I'm Amissa, and welcome to my channel, Amissa Loves. And it's June, so happy Pride. This month, I'm going to be posting a series of videos about my understanding of my own queerness, about my experience of coming into deeper authenticity around my sexuality, about what I've learned about myself through being in queer relationships, and how all of this, how my queer awakening has been both a part of and ultimately a catalyst for my spiritual awakening. And before we get into some of those juicier topics over the course of the month, I thought it would be a good idea to begin with an understanding of what I mean by the word queer. And maybe you've seen this quote going around online. It comes to us from the late, great Bell Hooks. And she says, queer not as being about who you're having sex with, that can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it, and that has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. So it's this definition of queerness, I think, that gets to the shared root of our pain and our power as queer people. The pain of being at odds, and the power that we discover through the necessity of conscious self-creation, of our finding and loving our way to a life in a reality that means us death. So queerness, for me, it becomes a sacred technology. It's a path that, for those of us who are called to it and who accept that call, those of us who live in alignment with the truth of their particular embodiment and expression, it offers us the chance to live our way into a life of greater authenticity in relation to self and to society. And energetically speaking, spiritually speaking, authenticity is the highest frequency at which we can vibrate. Our authentic self is our higher self. Maybe you've heard people talk about the higher self as your most evolved self, as the part of you that is a fractal of God or goddess or the universe or source or however you may name it. And another way that we can frame that is that your higher self is your most authentic self. It's your truest self. It's the state of being in which you exist beyond the constraints of ego, beyond your thinking mind, beyond that part of you that tells you who you have to be and what you have to do in order to earn your worthiness. Your higher self, your most authentic self, is the part of you that knows itself as inherently worthy, as a living, breathing state of worthiness. It is the you that is a part of the all that is. And this means that within a construct that relies on severing us from our higher selves, within this crumbling, dying, false reality that has forced us to adhere to dominant norms in order to have our needs met, within that reality, queerness is a threat. And it's a threat because authenticity is the kryptonite of that false construct of a reality. So to live in one's queerness, it offers a direct path to a life that is oriented toward alignment with that highest frequency, if we choose to accept that journey, and if we are internally and externally resourced to embrace it. And not only do we journey on this path as the individual, we also resource each other along the way. So I am better able to be myself because you are on the path of being yourself. And this co-creative state of being, it ripples out and it models authenticity to others, to the collective. You know, one of the primary ways that we're coerced into conforming is the threat of being alone, the threat of not having family, the threat of not being loved. Think about all the choices that we make, that I make, that you make, not because they're what we want, but because they're what we believe we have to choose in order to belong. So many queer people have the experience of being punished, being ostracized, being manipulated and coerced into questioning their own knowing of themselves, being violently rejected, being harmed, all because we dare to exist in a way that opposes a set of rules that were made up with the sole intent of social control. And when that happens, and we're still here, when that happens and we don't die, when that happens and we still create family and we are still loved and we still love ourselves, when that happens and we still belong to ourselves in spite of all of that, that worst case scenario, that threat that they hold over our heads, the thing of which we are most afraid, when that happens, and then we realize that we're still here, we recognize that the threat never actually had power over us. And then in that recognition, we model to the collective that the threat has no power over them either. We remind ourselves and each other that we have the power. Your existence, your embodiment in your full queer authenticity, it's a threat to the hierarchical structures that seek false power through false control. And if we need a reminder of the power that queerness holds, we can look at the history of how colonizers deliberately sought to erase and criminalize and demonize queerness as a part of their strategy of domination. Because we know that globally, queerness, transness, non-binariness has always existed, has always been a given, has always been a part of the status quo. And in some cultures, not only a part of the status quo, but existing within a sacred or venerated position within the collective. All of that has always been true. So then what does colonization do? This is the power that queerness holds. The attacks on trans people by this administration tell you the power that transness holds, right? And that power, it's not only about our day-to-day reality of how we date and relate and how we form family and how we express our gender and how we celebrate and co-create joy and how we offer each other safety. It's about all of that. And it's also a spiritual power. Because when we live and love as we truly are, we are raising the collective frequency. We are bringing our society closer to a collective authenticity, a collective highest frequency. And the thing is, for those people who are not choosing to face their pain and to find the root of their true power outside of the attempt to control, for those folks, queerness, it can make their brains glitch. Their system can get discombobulated in the face of the irrefutable existence of a queer person living their authenticity, of a queer person reminding them that they are also capable of living in their authenticity, that they are also capable of existing in defiance of the dominant norm. And the part of them that knows whatever truth of themselves that they're hiding, whatever pain that they feel about the part of them that they have not chosen to express openly, that energy, it has to be directed somewhere, and it often shows up as violence. The violence with which queerness is met is the evidence of an authenticity that reflects our inherent power back to those who are still seeking false power through control. Our drawing breath is such a threat to the part of them that is so scared of their own capacity to choose their authenticity, to embody their higher selves, to be who they are instead of who they've been told to be. This is the root of our pain as queer people, and it's the root of our power. In queerness, we demonstrate our power as creator beings. Our ability to create ourselves, recreate ourselves, to construct and reconstruct our material reality in alignment with our inner understanding of the truth of who we are. We find ways, we invent ways out of no way to embody and express that, to practice that authenticity in relationship with other people, even if we've never before had a model for what that looks like. Even if every model that we've been force-fed presumes that something is wrong with anyone who doesn't fall in line. Your queer existence is a physical embodied threat to hegemony, and that is very powerful. That is a power that encompasses both the material and the spiritual. That is magic. My own queer journey, my own long and winding road toward alignment with my higher self, that journey, it has saved my life. It saved my life from a life lived half alive, a life lived in material survival at the expense of spiritual decay. And one of my favorite writers, Ocean Vuong, he feels the same way. He says, being queer saved my life. Often we see queerness as deprivation, but when I look at my life, I saw that queerness demanded an alternative innovation from me. I had to make alternative routes. It made me curious. It made me ask, is this enough for me? So when you look at our shared reality, whether you identify as queer or not, when you see our current status quo, ask yourself, is this enough for you? Is it enough for you to resign yourself, to accept defeat, to stop questioning? Or do you know that there is more for us? Do you hear the voice inside of you that is demanding an alternative innovation from you for the sake of all of us? Queerness is sacred and divine, not only because all life is sacred and divine, but also because we're here on a soul level to remind the collective to demand an alternative version of themselves, to remind the collective that we are creator beings who need not accept a reality that exploits and extracts from and extinguishes us, to remind the collective that in choosing to align with our higher selves, with our authenticity, we have the power to save our own lives. And now is the time. Now is the time to be queer. Be queer in the bell hooks sense of the word, because you can be gay and not be queer. right? You can be gay and still uphold and seek to be included in the hegemonic norm, and that is not queer. So, whether or not you are gay, be queer. Be queer as in at odds with this false construct. Be queer as in inventive. Be queer as in creating something new that you feel internally as true. Be queer as in committed to remaining curious about what's possible and committed to remaining courageous about your own attempt to live in that direction. And if that for you entails taking the risk to expand into a deeper authenticity of how you experience attraction and relationships and gender, then let this be an invitation. Let this be an outstretched hand offering support as you take that step. And I won't lie to you, there's pain on this path, and you know that, but that pain is not evidence that the path is wrong. It's evidence that the path is, that it can be where we find and remember our power. It can be, if we choose, where we take steps together to get free. So let's get free. I'll be back next week to get into some more juicy queer content. Happy Pride. I love you, and we'll talk soon.